Exercise Balikatan, the Philippines, a massive joint training operation where U.S. Green Berets, Canadian Special Forces, and Philippine elite units run Direct Action CQB drills in a jungle-urban environment that mirrors the exact conditions both nations operate in across the Indo-Pacific. Canadian JTF2 operators were running a breach drill on a target structure. When they entered in silence. No explosive charge breaching the door, no gunfire clearing the room, no shouting, no audio signature whatsoever. Just Canadian operators flowing into a structure with a mechanical precision that was so complete, so seamless that the Green Berets positioned around the perimeter as security, the force whose entire job was to control the space around the target and monitor what was happening, didn't realize the breach had occurred until it was already finished. Not delayed, already complete. That moment, that silence, the moment when trained American operators had to admit they couldn't track when Canadian operators had actually begun their assault, that's when everything shifted about how the two nations understood modern close-quarters battle. Balikatan isn't a small training exercise. Annual, massive, multinational. The Philippines serves as the host nation, and both the United States and Canada bring significant special operations elements. The environment matters. Jungle transitions into urban, structures that have to be cleared going from triple canopy environment to high-density buildings. The terrain demands operators who can transition seamlessly between jungle warfare and urban assault, between open space tactics and confined space room clearing. For the Green Berets, Balikatan is straightforward in its operational logic. They bring the doctrine they've perfected across 2 decades of continuous operations: heavy firepower, drone support when available, overwhelming force applied to create decisive advantage. The American approach has been proven across Iraq, Afghanistan, and counterterrorism operations globally. When a Green Beret breaches a structure, he breaches with the full weight of American operational superiority behind him. For JTF2, Balikatan presented something different. An opportunity to operate alongside American forces, to understand their approach, and to demonstrate what Canadian operators had been developing at Dwyer Hill and in operational theaters across Africa and the Middle East. The demonstration came during a direct action drill that looked straightforward on the briefing. Breach a target structure, clear the rooms, identify and neutralize threats. Neutralizing, meaning in a training scenario, engage the target dummies representing hostile forces. Standard CQB objective. What happened during the execution surprised everyone who watched it, and when the drill was called complete, the Green Beret commander doing the debrief asked his team a direct question: "Did you see them breach?" The answer was silence. Not because the team was uncertain, not because they were afraid to respond, but because they genuinely hadn't seen it happen. A CQB breach executed with such mechanical perfection, such complete audio silence, such controlled violence that the force whose specific job was to establish perimeter security and track hostile movement, highly trained Green Berets with years of operational experience, had to admit they couldn't determine the exact moment the assault began. A trained operator at perimeter security in a CQB situation is trained to monitor several things: audio signature from the breach, visual indicators of successful entry, radio communications confirming the assault team is moving. All of those together create a timeline for the assault. The Green Berets lost the audio signature. Without that, the visual confirmation came so fast it was almost untrackable, and the radio communication, JTF2's internal assault team coordination, was kept minimal because the operators inside had developed a system where individual movement inside the structure communicated intent without verbal confirmation. That question from the American commander wasn't casual. It was a professional acknowledgement that what he just watched represented a doctrine he wasn't immediately familiar with. Here's the tactical difference that created that moment. U.S. Direct Action Doctrine, which Green Berets represent at the highest level, is built around overwhelming force application. You identify a target, you develop overwhelming advantage through firepower, air support, and force concentration. You apply that advantage decisively. Speed and violence of action create the operational advantage that allows forces to dominate the assault. It's proven, it works. It delivered success across multiple theaters, but it relies on one assumption: that overwhelming force creates sufficient advantage that losing audio signatures, losing stealth, accepting a loud breach is worth the security of knowing that whatever's inside the building is going to be overwhelmed by what's coming through the door. JTF2's approach inverts that assumption entirely. Instead of overwhelming the target structure with force, JTF2 breaches in mechanical silence. No explosives, no gunfire announcing entry, just a flow of operators moving through the entry point with such controlled speed that the breach itself, the moment of maximum vulnerability, is reduced to near zero duration. The doctrine is called flow state mechanical breaching. It's not a secret, it's not classified, but it's also not widely taught because it requires a completely different training methodology than what most militaries invest in.
Here's how silent mechanical breaching actually works. The breach point, the door or wall you're entering through, is identified beforehand. The preparation looks simple: position, angle, the exact spot where entry will occur. No variability, no improvisation. The assault team has trained this specific point 1,000 times. When the go signal is given, the assault team moves toward the breach point at a measured pace, not sprinting, not creeping, a measured pace that brings them to the breach point at exactly the moment they're committed to entry. At the threshold, there's no hesitation, no final assessment. The assault team has already made its decision. They flow through the breach point as a single organism, not as individuals. One operator goes left, one goes right. One provides overwatch. The fourth clears the secondary position. All of it happens without verbal confirmation, because it's been trained so intensely that it's become mechanical. No audio signature, because talking adds zero tactical value when the assault team's movement has already been choreographed. No explosive signature, because mechanical breaching, defeating the door through leverage, technique, and speed rather than explosives, eliminates the audio peak that explosives create. The result is a breach that's so quiet and so fast that a security perimeter monitoring for audio and visual cues can miss the exact moment when the assault team entered. The Green Berets understood this intellectually. They didn't just invent a doctrine and stick with it blindly. They watch what other elite units do. They study. They adapt. But there's a difference between understanding something intellectually and watching it executed at full speed with actual operators who've trained for years to perfect it. When JTF2 flowed through that breach point at Balikatan, when they cleared the room in silence, when the operation concluded before the perimeter security team could confirm it had begun, that wasn't a matter of Americans being slower or less skilled. It was a matter of different operational philosophy being executed by a unit that had trained specifically for that philosophy. The implication of that moment extends beyond a single training exercise. The US military doesn't learn from other nations casually. When a Green Beret commander asks why he couldn't track an assault that happened on his perimeter, and the answer is they were too silent, too fast, too mechanically perfect, that question travels up the chain to SOCOM, to Special Operations Command structures across the Pacific, to the planning cells that develop doctrine for future operations. Silent mechanical breaching isn't new. Hostage rescue units have been doing versions of it for decades. The SAS perfected it in the 1980s. But JTF2 had refined it into something that worked at full operational speed in dynamic environments, with assault teams that could maintain precision despite the physical demands of actual combat operations. And when a unit that size, that experienced, demonstrates that doctrine at an exercise like Balikatan, where Americans are watching directly, the response isn't dismissal, it's professional interest.
What happened after Balikatan mattered as much as the demonstration itself. The Green Berets didn't go home and ignore what they'd seen. SOCOM began examining silent mechanical breaching more seriously, not to replace American doctrine, but to integrate elements of it. Because modern joint operations where American and Canadian forces are running simultaneous missions, or integrated missions, or supporting each other from adjacent areas, requires both forces to understand each other's approaches. If a Green Beret perimeter is securing a location where Canadian operators are conducting an assault, and the Canadian assault is using silent mechanical breaching, while the American perimeter is trained to monitor for audio signatures. There's a breakdown in communication. The solution isn't for one nation to abandon its doctrine. It's for both to understand both approaches and integrate them into joint operational planning. Balikatan, by bringing both forces together and having them watch each other operate, forced that integration to happen. The deeper implication is about how modern special operations doctrine actually evolves. It's not through research papers and strategic reviews. It's through operators from different nations working alongside each other, watching each other execute, and being forced to acknowledge when something works that contradicts what they've trained to believe. JTF2 brought 50 operators to Balikatan, not to prove Canadian superiority, to demonstrate a specific tactical approach that American forces hadn't fully explored. The Green Berets brought their doctrine and their experience. The result was a conversation, not a competition, but a conversation about what modern CQB could look like when different approaches were integrated. That conversation shaped how both nations think about joint direct action operations going forward. Silent mechanical breaching isn't faster because it's more violent. It's faster because it's more precise. It removes variables. It eliminates the moment where defenders could respond to an audio cue that they're under assault. It treats the breach point not as a moment of conflict, but as a moment of transition from outside the structure to inside it. When the Green Beret commander asked his team why they couldn't track the breach, the answer was simple. They were already inside before we could confirm they'd entered. That's what different doctrine looks like when it's executed by a unit that has trained it to the level JTF2 has. Modern military doctrine doesn't evolve through research. It evolves when elite operators from different nations watch each other work and are forced to ask questions they didn't expect to ask. On military warfare, we cover the operations, the doctrines, and the moments when military establishments have to admit they missed something. Subscribe for more.